Is Menachem here?
No. So call.
Same in the morning. Erev Tov, everyone. Just an introductory word before we speak about the Parsha is that tonight begins Rosh Chodesh Tammuz. Very strange. Tammuz is mentioned in Tanakh as one of the pagan gods that the Jewish people worshipped during the time of the first temple. And that therefore seems to be somewhat out of character that we should call a month in the Jewish calendar on the name of this pagan god. But however, the names of the month as we have them now, where it says, Olu Mibavel im Ezra, when Ezra came the beginning of the second Commonwealth, so the Jewish people had already followed the Babylonian calendar, which had all of these names to them. So that the original Hebrew names have been forgotten or not used. For instance, the month of Iyar in Tanakh is called Chodesh Ziv, but no one refers to it as Ziv anymore. We refer to it as Iyar. And in the Torah itself, the months have no names. They are only numbered. B'chodesh HaRishon, B'chodesh HaSheni, B'chodesh HaShlishi. The Torah does not give it names, they give it numbers. So there are a number of ways of looking at this. One way, which is how most of the scholars look at it, is that it's a sign of the acculturation of the Jewish people, meaning the influence that the outside world had upon us. Prime example of that would be that in our time we use the civil date of the year. We say it's 2022. Even though that date has certainly a non-Jewish religious origin to it. And as late as the 19th century, there was a discussion amongst the poskim whether or not we should use the civil date. So in all the official rabbinic documents, let us say, or religious documents, we use the Hebrew date. In the Ketubah, in the Get, in the Chalitza, and whatever, we always use the Hebrew date. And so the question arose, can you use the civil date for civil documents? The Chatham Sofer made a compromise. He said just to put the two last numbers. So we could write that it is in June 28th or 29th, 22, instead of writing 2022. The problem with that is that naturally there can confusion can arise. Part of the reason was that the governments in Europe, where the Jews were, any document that had any legal effect had to have the civil date. So if a Jew wanted to make a transaction, wanted to purchase property, wanted to pay his taxes, whatever, he could only do so if he used the civil date. So then it became common, so that then most people don't even give it a second thought or to write 2022. So just as that happened in our time, so in the time when they came back from Bavel and they had the names of the months that were based upon the names of gods, but it lost its religious significance simply because of the fact that it was used so much that it became the civil date. There's an interesting idea regarding Tammuz that the Jews on purpose named the month Tammuz, because the month of Tammuz is not necessarily a happy month for us, both in times of the first temple and the second temple. The siege of Jerusalem began in Tammuz. The Gemara says that Chamishas Shivasar b'Tammuz, 5 terrible things happened to us in our history. So Tammuz is not a good month. I mean, I don't mean a good month, but it's not a month that Jews especially treasured because the historical events that occurred that were negative. So there are those that say that since the period of mourning begins in Tammuz, Shivasar Tammuz begins the 3 weeks. So because of that, therefore, they wanted to emphasize that it happened because of Tammuz, because Jews worshipped Avodah Zarah, and because of that sin. So then the month became a negative month, so to speak, in the Jewish world. Amongst the Sephardim, the 3 weeks aren't there. It begins only with the Rosh Chodesh Av, which is Medina of the Gemara. The Gemara says really only Shvuah Shechal Bo Tisha B'Av, the week of Tisha B'Av. So, for instance, I mean, this year Tisha B'Av is on a Sunday, I believe. Yes. So there's nothing. There's no Shvuah Shechal Bo. There's no week that Tisha B'Av falls into, because we go Motzei Shabbos straight into Tisha B'Av. So that period of mourning doesn't exist for the Sephardim. However, the Minig Ashkenaz always was to have the 3 weeks and begin with Shivasar Tammuz, and to begin with the 9 days with Rosh Chodesh Av, with a heavier period of mourning. One other point that can be made here, therefore, what about the days of the week? We say Sunday, Monday. So in modern Hebrew, we don't say that. We say the Hebrew name, Yom Rishon, Yom Sheni, Yom Shlishi, which is the biblical way of identifying the days of the week. But again, in the civil calendar, and not only that, the Ashkenazic Jews adopted the German names for the days of the week, Sonntag, Montag, the day of the moon. And Donnerstag is the god Thor. All of the names are pagan names. But again, that was a sign of the acculturation, so that generations later, no one even gives it a thought. No one recognizes it as being that. Against them, the Sephardim originally lived in Christian countries, then basically in Muslim countries. So the Muslim calendar is completely different. And also has religious names, but they have kept the names that existed even before Muhammad came into the world. So then the question is always, what name do you write? If you want to make a star, Reuven sold this property to Shimon, and you want the star to have legal effect, do you have to write the civil date? If you only write the Hebrew date, it may not have legal effect. And therefore, because of that, all of these other dates that came from other cultures and from other faiths even became incorporated in our world. And that's part of how we exist without giving us really that much pause. However, again, if in the tshuvas of the poskim, they are very adamant about this, that you should always try and use the Hebrew date. So for instance, now in the banks here in Israel, you have the choice. If you want to remember, I want to jog your memory, there was such a thing as a check. So if you want to put a date in a check for Bank Hapoalim or Bank Leumi, so you can write the civil date, June 28th, but you can write the Hebrew date too, and the bank will recognize it. This was a matter of discussion when the state was founded, because before the state was founded, it was all British and Turkish law. And the British law only recognized the civil date, and the Turkish law only recognized the Muslim date. And so if somebody wrote a document with the Jewish date, he would not have the ability to have it enforced. So that shaila came up many, many times here, especially in the early times when the JNF and others were trying to buy land here in Israel, and you had to go through the tabu, etc. So then the question of what day, what month, how to write it came. One more point, we're not going to get to the parsha today, I'm sorry, but I know you're just fascinated. There's something called Minyan Shtorot. Minyan Shtorot was a calendar that was adopted by the Jews after the time of Alexander the Great. When Alexander the Great came to Israel, he spared Jerusalem. So the Jews gave him 3 gifts. One gift is they called the firstborn sons after they're born that year, they called them Alexander. That's how the name became a Jewish name, Alexander, Sender, etc. The second thing was that they agreed that they would collect the taxes and give him. He didn't have to, so to speak, create an internal revenue service. And the third thing was that they changed the calendar. So they wanted to change the calendar to mark the year that Alexander came. which was 322 before the Common Era. But Chazal postponed it for 10 years till 312 before the Common Era, because that, the Gemara says, is exactly 1,000 years after Yetzias Mitzrayim. So it would be easy to remember. Yetzias Mitzrayim was in 1312 before the Common Era. And Minyan Shtor, that's called Minyan Shtarot, and that was used on all legal documents in the Second Temple. And in later times, we have Ketubot from the Middle Ages in Rome and Greece that are dated in Minyan Shtarot. And as late as the beginning of the state, there was a discussion whether or not Minyan Shtarot would be acceptable here. So there's a lot of history, so to speak, in simple things that exist in the Jewish world, such as the name of the month of Tammuz, which should be Lebracha, Leyeshua, Lebria, Lenachat. Rabbi Chananya ben Akash, Omer Ratzak HaRiboch, Musakas, Israel. V'chal hirbo lahem Torah mitzvot, Shem Adonai Chafetz Man Tzidko, Yagdil Torah v'Yadir.
Adonai Yeroichem Emet. ומלכוס באופן קיבלו עליהם משה ובני ישראל וחכמו שירו ושמחה רבה ויאמרו תפילה מלכוס חלו ובניך כי היום לפני משה זה אלי עליו יאמר ונאמר תיבדמן יעקב יעקב ובנו ברוכתו אדוני כהן ישראל Isadoris Alevi Salos Chab יזכרה שמי רבו, יום הגימח יוסי, וחייפון, ובימיכון, ובחייפון ישראל, אדמה בזמן קריבים, ויש מקבעות וגורק יורם, ישתמה מסועה, יסכלו מסזה, יסתרחו מסזה, יסכלו, שמי קודשו, ואין אותה בחוץ ושורה, ושורה, ורומי אבבים, יסכלו מסזה, Mishmaya Amen. Yeshua Rabba Mishmaya B'chaim Aleinu V'Kol Yisraelim Amen. Yeshua Rabba Kuyas Yeshua Aleinu V'Kol Yisraelim Amen. Kol Yisraelim. ונאמר בו ידנו אלוהיך כל הארץ, יום ההוא תהיה אדוני אחד ושמע אחד.
חודש טוב.
Somebody else.
Cheers.
Yeah. Okay.
Which have gone through.
Yes, I can
A
imagine.
lot of people.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, his name is Rami. If you want the phone number, I've even got his phone number, but I haven't got my phone with me. I can give it to you. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Okay. Oops. Now I've got to put this thing away here.